Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is our sixth in our Local Leader Global Impact Speaker Series, and I'm delighted to have so many of you here in the room, and I know it's not because of me, it's because of our two guests that are here today. But let me tell you a little bit about Northeastern University. My name is Cheryl Richards, and I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO and Regional Dean of this beautiful campus here in the heart of Charlotte. Been talking with a number of you this morning about the campus, and so I thought I'd just answer all the questions now, and then everyone will know why we're here. We came to Charlotte about 16 months ago and are offering master's degree programs here for working professionals in the heart of Charlotte. Currently offering 8 master's degrees in a variety of areas, business, finance and taxation, but also in industry-aligned program areas for Charlotte, which would include project management, health informatics, leadership, to really support all of the economies that we're trying to grow in the region. But beyond our master's degree programs, we really feel strongly about bringing the wealth of the university resources to the region so that we can really have a different conversation than we've had in Charlotte in the past. And so we are delighted today to bring two people who are both local leaders and both global experts in their respective fields. And so let me tell you a little bit about our panelists this morning. John Sylvia, Dr. John Sylvia, is actually what we call in the Northeast a double husky. And that is a two-time graduate from Northeastern University. John received both his undergraduate bachelor's degree in economics and his PhD in economics from Northeastern University. Did a little sidetrack there to go to Brown for his master's degree, but we don't hold that against him at all. Most of you in Charlotte here know John as the managing director and chief economist of Wells Fargo. You also know that he is a preeminent speaker and frequently called upon to comment on economic forecasts. Such that for the second time in 3 years, he has now been awarded the best overall forecast by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, as well as the best unemployment rate forecast for 2011. He's on the Bloomberg's best forecast list for his forecasts of GDP, the ISM Manufacturing Index, housing starts, and the unemployment rate. So pretty knowledgeable there. Prior to his role at Wells Fargo, John worked on Capitol Hill as a senior economist for the U.S. Joint Economic Committee and chief economist for the U.S. Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. Also worked at Kemper Funds as managing director.
That's enough.
That's enough. I'm going to stop there. I will deviate from script and say that we are very, very thankful to have you here because yesterday he was on a plane from Dubai. So thank you very much for being here. And we'll keep you loaded on coffee. Our second distinguished guest is Dr. Ravi Ramamurthy, and I have the pleasure of working with him as one of our Northeastern faculty. He is the Distinguished Professor of International Business and Strategy and also the Director of the Center for Emerging Markets at Northeastern University in Boston. He actually traveled from Boston yesterday, not Dubai.
Not as bad as you, John. I traveled from South Park this morning. Come on.
Eric came in from South Park. Dr. Ramamurthy has his DBA from Harvard University, an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, and his BS in physics, of all things, from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University in India. His research and consulting expertise is really in the area of corporate strategy and business and government relations in emerging markets. Currently doing research on internationalization strategies of multinationals from some of these emerging markets. He teaches courses on global business, environment, and global strategy. And prior to coming to Northeastern University, served as a consultant to the Planning Commission of the Government of India, a senior advisor to the United Nations in South Korea and Bangladesh, and as a consultant to many governments, including Argentina, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Ecuador, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, Nicaragua, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea. Whew! You are a busy man. Also has been an advisor to the World Bank of the United Nations and the U.S. Agency for International Development. So needless to say, we are in good company this morning, are we not? So I am going to now introduce Eric Spanberg, who many of you know from the Charlotte Business Journal wonderful partner of ours in this series, who has prepared some questions for these two gentlemen to talk about the emerging markets and our competitive position within them. And then partway through the program, he will pause and come to you for questions. So I would encourage you to now be thinking about those, because he will turn the tables on you and the questions will come to you. So Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, after hearing those impressive credentials, I have to tell you, I have stayed at a Holiday Inn Express before, so that's why I'm here. So as Cheryl mentioned, welcome to Northeastern University, and we are, this is our third of 2013. We talked about sustainable energy and education previously, and this is obviously a very timely topic given what's going on in the economy here and abroad, and you know, I think it's safe to say that even, probably even before the Clinton days of NAFTA, those of us in media, business, and academics have thrown around words such as emerging markets and global economy. And so what we want to get our experts to do here is to actually delve into those buzzwords and tell us where we stand, both in the Charlotte region and across the country. So as Cheryl said, I'm going to throw a few questions at these guys, and then we'll put y'all to work with the really good questions. So let's start with our man from Dubai. John, you've just returned from spending a few weeks over there. The Middle East is not a part of the world that does a lot of business with Charlotte yet, but obviously it does do plenty of business with other parts of the U.S., and it's vital for all of the obvious reasons. So what did you learn while you were over there?
I think that history matters. I think that for most of us, our first inclination and maybe our first foreign trip is to Europe. Oftentimes to see London or Paris or maybe the homeland of our forefathers. But I think that if we think about the history, we realize that as far as Dubai goes and the whole Persian Gulf area, they have a long history of trading with the East. So for them, there's been a long history of India trading with them. There's a long history, as I saw, with respect to Russia. And so their history is a little bit different than ours. I think the second thing that was really key about Dubai, and again tying it into here, was the emphasis that they put on education. Both men and women, and I think a lot of us in America really have to get over our prejudices. When you're in Dubai, I think the ratio is 8-to-1. Foreigners to domestic people. And the Westerners and the locals dress the way they want to dress. Yes, you certainly have some people dressed in Arab or whatever you want to call it garb, but the vast majority of locals don't dress that way. They dress Western. And obviously a lot of the Westerners dress Western. Mm-hmm. So if you're in Dubai, and I would suggest that sometimes when you're in Europe and you need 3 days of nice warm weather and pools and beach, go to Dubai for a long weekend on your trip from, side trip from Germany. But their emphasis on education is really key. And I was talking earlier about they have, their high college, their high university, really an amazing engineering and professional services school. I mean, you walk in there, as I did, and you see the labs that are donated by HP and Cisco, Siemens, General Electric. You walk in and they tell you that they have no books. All their books, all their textbooks are on iPads. And all the iPads were bought by the sheikh, okay? So the sheikh is buying all these undergraduate students, men and women, all right, iPads, and all their textbooks, all their communication with the professors is on there. So they have a really, really high emphasis in terms of quality education. Another sidelight, of course, as many of you may or may not realize, is that if you're a non-UAE person, you have to have a job to be there. You can't be unemployed and live in the UAE if you're a foreigner. So there's another incentive there. So I would say, one, and again, building on your comment, a lot of the focus is to the east, not to the west. There's obviously a huge amount of trade that goes on with Germany and French companies because their presence there. And then second, there's huge emphasis on quality education. an amazingly good education.
Before I turn to Ravi, I do want to ask you one quick follow-up, which is, when you talk about that emphasis toward the East, do you get a sense of how much of that is driven by history and how much of that is driven by political perception?
Oh, I think okay, that's a good point. I would say from their point of view, it's history. For someone in the UAE, and again, I would say also Kuwait and Qatar or Qatar, whatever you want to say. From their point of view, it's history. I think that the challenge for most Americans, perhaps even in Charlotte, is to get over this thing about dealing with the Arabs. I think it's when I've been there and come back, I just think, we just have this huge prejudice about what they do and what they don't do, and we are really missing the boat because these people want things to be done, and somebody has to do it. And so there's a lot of American expertise that can go into doing these things. And obviously, for HP and Cisco and GE, they're doing something there. They have big offices, so.
Well, spanning the globe, Ravi, you've just returned from several weeks of research in India. Tell us a little bit about what you were studying and why you were studying it over there.
Well, I went to India to study the healthcare industry, which is an industry I hadn't studied before. But you think about the parallels between the US and India in the issue of healthcare, it's more than you might expect. I mean, think of the big issues we wrestle with in the US. One is access. How do you give everyone access to healthcare? The other is quality. And the third is cost. And these are exactly the issues people are struggling with in India. You've got 20% of the world's population. About 10% of them have access to any kind of healthcare, and most of them in the big cities. So the interesting question is, what is India doing and what are Indian hospitals doing to expand the reach to provide good quality service at ultra low cost? Because it has to be ultra low cost because India cannot afford anything more expensive. Let me give you two examples of hospitals I visited which were quite amazing. One is a hospital called Arvind Eye Care System, and they do cataracts as if they're flipping hamburgers, literally. In fact, that's the model they use. The guy who founded the hospital said, why can't we do cataract surgery the way McDonald's makes hamburgers? And the idea is to have an assembly line kind of an approach, very low cost, consistently high quality, and they can do a cataract for $60. And the quality of the outcomes is as good as or better than hospitals in the UK and in the US. Wow. Now you might say, well, cataracts is one thing, but I went to another hospital that does open heart surgery. They do open heart surgery for $2,000. It costs $70,000 to $100,000 to do it in the US. So what I found was in the best hospitals, the ones that are the most innovative in India, they're providing high quality care for about 2 to 3% of the cost in the US. Now, you might say, well, that's because the labor is cheap. Well, guess what? It's cheaper than here. It's maybe a fifth of the cost. In some cases, it's half the cost because, cardiothoracic surgeon in India makes pretty good money. And very often they're people who are trained in the US and have gone back. So there's more to this than just cheap salary, cheap labor and low-cost nurses. They're doing a lot of innovative things. And the value of this for the US, I think, is there's no reason why some of those innovations could not be brought back and applied in the US. And we don't have to match the costs that they have in India. That'll never happen. But all we have to do is to bend the cost curve, as everyone says. And I think you can look to places like India for ideas. They're looking to the US constantly for ideas. When you go to China, when you go to India, these countries are always looking to the advanced countries for ideas. But the advanced countries are not looking to these countries for ideas. And the fact of the matter is, there are ideas you can take from those places. And it goes back to the point John was making about our prejudices or assumptions even. It may not even be a prejudice, it's just an assumption that innovation happens here and over there. They take the innovations from here and they apply them. And that's true. A lot of that happens. But there's also potential for moving innovations in the other direction. And that was the motivation for what I was doing. Let me tell you one thing this doctor who runs this heart hospital told me. I asked him, he's opening up a hospital in the Cayman Islands. He's going to do heart surgery in the Cayman Islands for 40% of or 30% of the prices we pay in the US. It's an hour's flight from Miami. He's working with an American partner to set up the hospital. I asked him, why are you bothering with all of this when there is so much need for your services in India? And he said something I thought was quite profound. He said, we need America to lower its healthcare costs before we can lower our healthcare costs. I said, what do you mean? He said, look at all the equipment I have. The scanners from GE, you know, the MRI machine from Siemens. All of these are priced in ways that hospitals in the West can afford. Unless they feel the pressure to bring down their costs, these machines, which we depend on, will never become cheap enough for us. What we can add to the equation is enormous volume. We need 10,000 MRI machines, not 500. We can't buy 10,000 of them at $5 million a pop. But if you get it down to 200,000 a pop, we'll buy 10,000 of them. So he's saying, what we can do is give the volume. You work with us. You help bring down the costs. It will save you. It will save us. And it's exactly what's happened in the telecommunications industry. The volume of phones purchased in these countries has helped to bring down the cost of phones for everybody. So that's sort of a long answer to your question. The connection between what goes on in the US and what goes on in some of these other emerging markets.
Well, I guess picking up on both of your themes, innovation is always a big issue, and particularly in light of concerns about declines in U.S. education and surging investments by China, among others. Ravi, one of the things that you're studying is reverse innovation. I'm just wondering if each of you can discuss a couple of aspects of innovation that you find most urgent or intriguing for economic perspective.
Yeah, I think I sort of already touched on it. I think what the U.S. is outstanding at is moving the frontiers of knowledge. Few other countries, can match us in terms of the capacity to move the frontiers of knowledge and then apply that and commercialize that. The one element that I think we need to add to this mix is to have a more global view of innovation, and to think of innovation not just as moving the frontiers of knowledge, but sometimes improving the processes by which things get done. And that's really what the example I gave from Indian healthcare is doing. They're not discovering anything new. They're not inventing anything new. They're not finding a new drug. They're not finding a new procedure. What they're doing is taking the existing medical knowledge and finding ways to apply it to large numbers of people at very low cost while maintaining high quality. So think of it as process innovation. Think of it what the Japanese did for manufacturing, right? They didn't make brand new cars completely based on new technology. They found better ways to make lots of cars more cheaply of high quality. This kind of innovation, I think, is happening in many areas in the emerging markets. And those ideas can be brought back, and that's what we mean by reverse innovation, is taking those ideas and bringing them back. And to just give one example that may be relevant in the context of Charlotte, which is a huge banking center. The most exciting things in wireless banking are not happening in the US, they're not happening in Europe, they're happening in Kenya, where people are using their phones to engage in commercial transactions. And when the phone companies found that people were paying each other in minutes, telephone minutes, because they didn't have bank accounts.
Right.
And they said, why not make this legit? Why not just make this a form of banking? So in Kenya, 70% of the population is using wireless banking. And the Kenyan company that does this is doing more volume each year than Western Union does globally. This tiny little country in that one market is doing volumes greater than Western Union is doing globally. Now, if you're in banking, you should be interested in this.
Right.
Because they're saying you don't need brick and mortar banks. They're saying you don't even need ATMs. You just need a phone.
And you're saving a ton of money if you don't need those things.
Transaction costs are down. You can do very micro transactions, which is what poor people want. And you avoid all of the overheads and all of the infrastructure. And if I'm here in the U.S. and I'd be concerned, could somebody bring that technology and apply it, even if I don't? And if I don't want to because I already have too many branches and too many ATMs, what if somebody else brought it in and it spread in the U.S.? That's an example of reverse innovation that could really completely disrupt existing industries in the U.S.
All of a sudden, you're the record company while iTunes is blowing by. John, what do you see that intrigues you?
Well, I think you start out by distinguishing two different types of innovation. The one is the evolutionary innovation, which again refers to the process, making the process better. And then there's the revolutionary. So the revolutionary is I come up with an iPhone. The evolutionary is iPhone 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I think whenever we talk about innovation, we need to distinguish those two different types of innovation and what we're really trying to achieve here. And to the extent we look at Charlotte, I think we see a city that still is focused on, process innovation rather than revolutionary innovation. So I think one of our challenges is, how do we get the revolutionary concept in here? A lot of that is, again, venture capital money perhaps coming in, again, building upon the educational institutions we have here. I think that's a big distinction as well.
Obviously, our political leaders spend plenty of time talking about surviving and thriving in this global economy that we're talking about. What do each of you see in terms of working on solutions, whether it's at the federal or state levels of government?
Well, I would go back and ask myself, and maybe John knows the answer. I mean, do we in Charlotte have a sister city in the Middle East? I don't know that we do.
I think we do. But
I mean, it's Peru, we have one. Poland, we have one. If you want to think about, really expanding the borders of Charlotte and making us more relevant. I mean, have we ever done exploratory trips to Abu Dhabi or Dubai and say, hey, we want to be your sister city? I mean, I don't know whether some of that gets done, but I would say that would be a path that perhaps we could follow and go for. I think another thing what struck me about education, and again, I don't know what the Northeastern University people think about this, but in the school that I visited, the engineering university I visited in Abu Dhabi, everything was done collaborative in terms of teamwork. Culturally, for me, I'm in the generation that, you sort of went to class and then you went to a corral in the library and studied for 4 or 5 hours at night by yourself. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I remember very few, if any, graduate or undergraduate team projects that I ever did. Everything was done in team projects. So that, again, is, building upon what Ravi had to say. I mean, how do you come up with the innovations? And it may be that they're emphasizing teams as a way of innovating rather than some individual scientist sitting in a corner inventing some great idea. I mean, yeah, okay, that was great for Isaac Newton. But, realistically, when we think about how we develop innovation and change, that is an interesting way. And I think for Charlotte, in terms of the city and what it wants to do, it may be useful to put some teams together and really think about what we're going to do. And I know the Chamber always does these trips. I know that, but I don't know. Has the Chamber ever done the trip to Abu Dhabi or Dubai? I mean, have we ever done anything like? Have we really gotten out of our comfort zone? We're always, I don't know. Have we ever visited a non-American city by the Chamber?
We tried to visit London. Tried to go to London.
London? Oh, come on. I grew up in the Boston area, and going to London was like going to my second home. It was just was so much in my comfort zone. I mean, the street names were the same, the town names were the same, the food was the same. I remember when I left Northeastern and went to teach at Indiana University, I had fish and chips in Indianapolis, which was fish and potato chips. And like, what kind of fish and chips are these? But I don't know. I'm sure there are reasons why it failed, and I'm sure you've studied it fairly well in terms of how it failed. it just strikes me that, wow, you know, some of these other places offer some incredible opportunities. And so you talk about innovation. Maybe one of the innovations of Charlotte is to say, okay, we're going to get the hell out of our comfort zone and innovate. And again, it may be that trying to put 20 people into Dubai and Abu Dhabi is too much, but maybe 3 to 5 would work. I don't know. You start somewhere, right? I mean, even Columbus started somewhere.
The trips the chamber puts on are to look at the cities and how they function in comparison to Charlotte, not the business community and how they could interact with Charlotte's business. That might be a whole new concept.
Well, again, there's your innovation. Change the framework of your thinking in terms of what goes on. But I think, again, Dubai and Abu Dhabi have lots of traffic. There's no doubt about it. But there may be some things we can learn from them about the city and how they run too.
What are all those engineering people doing in those schools that you talk about?
They are really emphasizing something to do with aircraft engineering, cooling, heating, dealing with their climate. I stayed at the Grand Hyatt Dubai, and it's a green building. It's with that LEED thing. It's a LEED building. I mean, it just cools itself and it heats itself, and they just managed to be able to do everything well. It's one of those hotels that you have to put the key in to get the electricity to work in the room, and you can't. You know, the TV shuts off, the air conditioning shuts off, everything shuts off. You can't. And the other thing that's interesting is even if, and my wife and I tried this and it didn't work. We've got 2 room keys, right? So we said, okay, we're going to leave 1 key in so that the air conditioning will still be on when we get back. Somehow or other, the system senses that no one's moving in that room, and then it shuts off anyway, and that's it. So anyway.
They're on to your American tricks.